What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of TOJ Talks. I'm your host, Will Parkinson, at WillPod11 on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, Will Parkinson NFL on YouTube. I am freshly back from Indy, sleep deprived. We're doing this a fourth take because Riverside was bothering us. Now we're on Zoom. This is a disaster. We will have a good pod for you, though, in store. Joined by Jason Fitzgerald, of Over the Cap. Jason, how we doing? Hopefully you can hear me this time. We might be set.
I'm doing pretty good.
All right, good.
It's working right now.
All right,
So
we're good.
we'll see how
Yeah,
it goes.
we're gonna roll. If it doesn't work, we're not trying it the fifth time. So I just kind of go fuck myself. But regardless, back from Indy, obviously, crazy week, and you get to meet a bunch of people, talk to people in the league. See people you get to, some people from Mobile and some people, from around the league. It's obviously a crazy time. Not a lot of Jet stuff in terms of really truly on the field. Obviously, Joe Douglas speaking, didn't get much out of it. We got some, a little bit of kind of what we assumed with Elijah Vera Tucker, Zach Wilson trade request, availability to seek a trade or a trade to the CFL. We're not really sure there, but I want to start kind of with some, I guess, technically breaking news as of 20-ish minutes ago as we're recording. Tyron Smith, who I kind of was under the impression it was Dallas or walk away. Honestly, I felt like you can't really see Tyron Smith in any other uniform other than the star on his helmet, and he's really the only free agent left tackle. Like I think is worth pursuing if you're the Jets. What do you make of that? And then we'll get into some of the other stuff. But in terms of Tyron and maybe what kind of deal he might be looking for.
Yeah, so I kind of figured that he would end up being a free agent this year. I didn't think that Dallas was going to keep going there. He's been injured a couple of times, and I thought they were just going to look to go younger. They always kind of invest in that offensive line, so they always seem to have guys ready to kind of jump in. A little bit different than the Jets, where we didn't have anybody to jump in. My guess is he's looking for big money, not going to get it. I think he'll end up getting something probably similar to what we gave Dwayne Brown a couple of years ago. I think you're looking at 2 years, $25 million. Most of it probably guaranteed. Good player when he's healthy. He's probably only going to give you 11 or 12 games, but it's what you're going to get with him when he's on the field.
Yeah, he's somebody that played at all pro level last year. There's no doubt about that. My one concern with the Jets, I guess, is can they afford to take a risk on a guy that may only play 12 or 13 games, right? Like that's the big question. And I think it's probably worth it if you feel confident Carter Warren's your swing guy and you get a right tackle in the draft and it allows you to maybe trade back or maybe take somebody, maybe take a Brock Bowers or something like that because you feel like you can get a right tackle later, whatever it may be, or maybe Elijah Vera Tucker, which we'll get to in a second, is your right tackle, him and Tyron, and you draft a guard and trade back, whatever it's going to be. He allows you a lot of flexibility. Like I said, I'm just slightly worried from the aspect of, is he due for like a 9-game, missing 9 games as opposed to just his normal 2 to 3, maybe 4 games playing banged up the whole year? Is that kind of your concern too? I guess is it a Jets thing? Like I hate to be that guy, but it feels like a Jets thing to get Tyron Smith and
yeah, I think I feel like if they did sign him, the first thoughts on it would probably be negativity. It's like, you're bringing another old guy. It's another guy with injury concerns. I kind of feel like that's the way it would be. But let's be real. The Jets need a bunch of starters on the offensive line, and you're probably going to have to take chances at one of those spots. And if it means signing 2 guys, if it means bringing him in and bringing back somebody like a George Fant, one of these guys that's a veteran, that's willing to be a backup, and have to start for you for those, in worst case scenario, 6, 7, 8 games, I think you can do something like that. But I think if you go for someone like that, you probably want insurance policy, probably beyond Warren on the team. I think you'd look for another veteran that you can get for, Fant signed last year in free agency for like $3 million. So, I mean, that type of player, I don't know if you bring him back, but, that type of player that you can get $3 million, $4 million on top of whatever you're going to spend on Smith.
What, in terms of, you mentioned it a little bit, what's a contract look like for a guy like that? I know you mentioned obviously, I think we've talked a little bit about off air, like when Trent Williams got 2 years ago from San Fran. Like, is he just going to look for like 20+ million? Like, what are we talking here? Just because the name grants top 3 tackle money, he's 33, and although his play is still really good, again, as we mentioned, he's 33. Like, you don't usually see 33-year-olds command 20+ million a year.
Yeah, I'm not sure if he'll be one of these guys that's first off the board, and I think that'll be the reason why. It's one of those things where first you try to see if there's a team out there, and I'm sure they should have gotten some feel for this in the combine this week, but you get a feel for if there's a team out there that is willing to do that. And remember, Williams went in free agency too and was not getting that kind of interest. Then he ends up going back to San Francisco. They're willing to do the big deal for him. My guess is it waits until like May timeframe and the price tag kind of comes down. And now that's a long time to wait. If you're the Jets, that's kind of a risky thing. You may have to move on. But that's probably the way that goes is he's going to set his sights really high. And then that number is going to pull down if there's not that team that's out there right on the first, day or two of free agency. And my guess is there won't be a team out there first day or two of free agency looking to spend that kind of money for him.
Yeah, he's somebody you got to get in your building, get medicals on, make sure the neck and the back clear out and everything like that. I want to hit on a couple of things of, it's during the week that, kind of happened from a Jets perspective. I'm not going to I already hit on all the Deion Dawkins and McCole Hardman and what else happened? There was a bunch of just random drama around the team and tweeting and stuff like that. I did want to hit on one thing from Joe Douglas's presser that I think does stand out, and that, he mentioned Elijah Vera Tucker is going to play one position next year. I think Connor Rogers mentioned on Badlands earlier in the week that everyone concerned about tackle from an injury perspective. It's more the fact that he's played left side, right side. That could be more, adding to, it's different footwork, it's different hand placement, it's different things for his body. I don't think it's necessarily guard versus tackle. It's not as if playing guard, you just don't get touched, and tackle, you take all the brunt. So what do you make of that? I think that means it's pretty clearly he's playing right tackle, and this interior market's way better to me than the tackle market. And there's only really two true left tackles in the draft that are first round guys. So that feels like to me, it's 10-minute center guard, AVT at tackle, depending, and then you got to fill 3 spots, over the next 8 weeks.
Yeah, I think that would be my guess as to what they're looking to do. And I think when you look at last year, really the last 2 years with him, you don't want to have to shuffle guys all over the place. It becomes a pain. You're looking for continuity on the offensive line, and Woody came out those couple of weeks ago where one of the things he brought up was the offensive line and, having guys that are playing together and everything else. So I'm sure from just the standpoint of even Joe Douglas and Robert Saleh meeting with the owner, they probably are pitching to him now, like, look, we're done with this experiment of somebody gets hurt, we're moving him to the right side. Now somebody gets hurt, we're moving to the left side. He's just staying at one spot. Somebody gets hurt, we'll deal with that spot. We're not going to move him over there. So I think that's exactly what they'll do. And you're going to look at free agency, see who they can bring in. And when you probably do have a better chance of signing guards in free agency, it kind of makes sense that the initial plan would be to kick him to one of the tackle spots, probably the right side. But, that's what they would plan on doing.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you about a few other kind of internal Jets things, and then just talk a little bit about some of these, pending free agents potentially and things of that nature. Obviously, we haven't talked really about Zach in a while. I think last offseason we were talking Lamar Jackson, stuff like that. Obviously, there's the Zach piece that gets leaked last night from someone from ESPN Radio in BYU, and how John Beck and a bunch of other people, former BYU linebacker, just kind of eviscerating the Jets, and how it's the Jets' fault. He should have gone to San Francisco and held out, and he would still be there, even though, as Michael Megan of draft season pointed out, Brock Purdy probably would have replaced Zach at some point. Had great football IQ, the whole 9 yards. We knew that article was coming from somewhere, right? The Jets they've had plenty of pieces about Zach, obviously mid-season, him not wanting to play and all that different type of stuff. We were expecting a BYU puff piece on Zach. What do you make of that? I think it's a late day 3 pick that's maybe Zach in a 7 to move up to the 6 to Arizona or something, because the money there is like a huge hurdling block. It's not just a guy who hasn't been good. It's a guy who hasn't been good that's owed pretty good chunk of change that's not even guaranteed as a backup.
Yeah, so I think you're right. I think you'd be looking at one of these kind of late pick swaps, like you give us a 6, we give you a 7, and that's that. If they're willing to take on that deal, it's probably got like a $5 million roster bonus, something like that is what's going to be due in August. And I don't know if a team really wants to take that on. The Cowboys did do it with Trey Lance last year, but that was getting 2 years of someone. And Lance has been still kind of sight unseen.
Yeah, we just don't know what Lance is. That's what I keep
Yeah.
having this conversation. Like, there's too much film on Zach. There's no film on Trey Lance, so we don't really know what he is. He probably stinks, but like we don't really know.
Yeah, that's the big difference. I mean, the reason everyone says he stinks is just, didn't look good in the preseason when he played, and you have a lot of respect for the head coach's, evaluation of his offensive talent. And if he's like, I want to get rid of this guy, you're just saying, okay, he's got to be terrible if Shanahan can't do anything with him. Wilson, I mean, we've seen it. I mean, his whole game is basically throwing to the other team. So, it's like he'll give you one good pass a game, maybe, but it's something that wows you when you see it. But I don't know if you're willing to spend, $6 million, on something like that. So, I thought it was funny. It's like the Jets have given him permission to seek a trade. It's like, is there another team that's going to permit him to actually even talk to him? I don't know if they're going to want to even, have that kind of discussion. So, because I don't think the Jets can have him back on the roster next year. So even if you wanted him, you could probably just have him get released, have the Jets pay his salary, and you go sign him for the minimum, and see if you can rehab him.
If they cut him, is it still the same as if they trade him in terms of a money perspective for the Jets?
No. So if they trade him, that roster bonus and his base salary for the year would transfer to the other team. So they wouldn't have to deal with that. If they cut him, his cap number remains just as it is now because they have to account for all the salary that's guaranteed
Jesus Christ.
on his deal. So, whatever that is. I mean, it seems like a lot because he's been so bad. But if he's a backup quarterback, I mean, it's not terrible. So it's a $5.4 million in salary this year, is what a team would owe him. So, they'll have to see what they do. But yeah, there's no way. I mean, they can keep him for a month or two. I don't think there's a way that they can like hold on to him, June, July, August. I think then you'll get a fit from his agent. You'll get it'll just be a nasty scene if he's not traded during the draft. I think he can go that far. And then at that point, it's either you trade him right away or you probably have to cut him.
Yeah, it's one of those things that I think it's a addition by subtraction. It's over, move on. It's annoying for the fan base. It's annoying for, I think, media wise. It's annoying. I think probably other players having to like Sauce Gardner's quoting that to be like a good guy. Like, do not be like, oh, he knows what he's talking about. See, Zach's good. Like, please stop. I don't think that the defensive guys are the happiest with the performance of the worst quarterback in the NFL last 3 years. Yeah. I want to move on to a couple pending in-house guys and then a couple pending, exterior guys. We've talked a lot about Bryce Huff. We both are big fans of the player and in the person, all that different type of stuff. Connor Hughes had a kind of a report. He thinks his market's more in the $12 to $14 million a year range. I've heard definitely a little bit more than that personally. I'm not saying Connor's wrong. He's super plugged in and has done a great job with a lot of Jets news. So the Jets beat does break news. Connor does a great job. It's nothing against him. I know you mentioned, I think on an article with Rich, that potentially in the $17 to $20 million a year range. I've said 3 for 51. Me and Brad Spielberger said it weekly on our pod for almost 6 months now. 3 for 51, 28 to 30 guaranteed. Like gets a little bit more than Lawson got because there's more production. Is that fair? Like, where are we at with this thing? Because it feels like if he gets to free agency, which it kind of feels like he will, like Washington or the Giants or somebody will come in and pay him and they're going to have to overpay. It's the free agency market. That's what happens. But I'm like 80% he's gone, but there's still 20%, right? They could get a deal done. They should get a deal done, especially with the new cap number being higher and having some space.
Yeah. So, I mean, he's kind of, weird isn't the word, but it's very hard to comp him to anybody else in the league. You're looking at someone who is highly productive as a pass rusher when he's on the field. He's only on the field 40% of the time. The Jets don't see him as a full-time player. That didn't change last year. I can't see why that would change in the future. I mentioned this when I spoke to Rich doing that piece with him. When you watch him where he's coming from his pass rush, there's not a lot of defenses, even in the third downs, that are going to use that wide kind of alignment that the Jets use. I mean, he's basically out there sometimes where you would expect like a corner to be blitzing.
I was going to say, he's basically like a nickel corner that blitzes.
Yeah. So, it's very different. That's a very different type of defense. So that's not the same kind of profile where someone says, okay, this is a part-time player. Imagine if we had him on there for 70% of the snaps. People may look at that and say, this doesn't fit in our system whatsoever. And, that can really limit his market. In terms of how often he plays, productivity, he does kind of match with those guys who, teams have kind of taken a chance on, that are in that $13 million a year range. But in terms of just what you see physically with the type of get off that he's got and those times when he just, really gets after the quarterback, that is what you would imagine for a guy who's earning 17 to $20 million a year. So I think it's a really hard kind of balancing act. There clearly the Jets don't value him at 20. If they did, they would have franchise tagged him. The fact that they didn't franchise tag him just let you know that they're not doing it. I think 17 makes sense for them to kind of come to an agreement. And I think if they do come to an agreement, it'll be one of those that happens on that first day of that open negotiating window, where he has a chance to go and talk with one or two other teams. When that number 20 doesn't come out there, I think then you might go back to the Jets and say, look, is your offer 17 or 18 or 16, whatever that number is, still on the table? Can we work with that? Let's even get a deal done. And you might do that. So I do think there's still a chance that he'll come back, only because I'm just so uncertain of how the rest of the league is going to see him.
Yeah.
So I think there's a possibility. I'd probably put it less than 50%, but I think there's still a decent possibility that he comes back, especially if the owner gives pressure on it too, because he's a popular player. Jets Twitter loves him, and if
we know that matters.
yeah, so you get that out there, and the owner's like, well, what are we doing with him? Like, why isn't he coming back? Sometimes that kind of pushes you in a certain direction. So I think it's still on the table for him to come back, even though they aren't going to tag him, and there's no deal coming out of the combine or anything like that.
Yeah, no, I only thing I didn't love at the combine is, like, I know they were not going to tag him, but it just felt like, to say, like, so abruptly, like, we're not tagging him, felt like you kind of just, like, why not keep the leverage a little bit if you're the Jets, of like, we can tag you if we want to.
Yeah, I think they just don't even want that out there. I think that immediately sets the salary expectations too high for what
Oh, I
they
see what you're saying.
probably see it. So they're probably coming at this from the point of, look, if you can go out there in free agency and get yourself 20 a year, shake your hand, pat you on the back, thanks for the couple of years, congratulations. But they don't want to come in there and give him the leverage to say, oh, you know what, if I don't go sign with another team, you're going to pay me $23 million this year, whatever that tag number is. And you're telling me I'm a franchise player. They're trying to say you're not a franchise player. You're a tier below that. So I think that's why they just don't even have that in there. Kind of in their toolbox, so to speak, as a way to get leverage for him.
No, that makes sense. In terms of Laken Tomlinson, I'm getting off the plane in Indy, and I see him, see the Jets release him. I talked to some people around the league who are actually pretty surprised that he didn't get restructured or cut or take a pay cut. A couple people, interdivision people, I'd leave it at that work in other front offices were like, I don't know why the Jets cut him. He plays every game. I think it's hard when you watch him, every day, and you feel like he just has not gotten better. And it's probably regressed the other way, obviously. And, can you upgrade for $8 million a year? You probably can. It just felt like to cut him, eat 12 million or 11 or 12 million bucks. I know he was doing like 13 million in cash.
Yeah.
I think that was probably I'm sure that was probably a pretty big factor. I don't know for sure, but I can assume, knowing the Jets, that might have been a factor. I just felt like I was surprised, because I felt like I get off the plane Monday, I'm thinking, okay, I guess I get it. I thought a restructure made more sense. You can save some dead money. At least you have a guy who's going to start 17 games, that, and he should get better with better tackle play, another year at center, Rodgers, etc. And then people around the league kind of got me like thinking twice. I was like, wait, people are surprised. I guess it's because if you're not around the Jets every day, like, you still assume, hey, Pro Bowler, first round pick, good guy, he must still not be that bad. What did you make of the whole situation? And do you think it's going to have, what kind of impact does this have on them, on their offseason?
Yeah, I mean, I didn't think they would cut him. I thought, given all the holes they had on the offensive line, I thought they would have gone in there and said, look, we'll keep you, but we got to keep you for $8 million or $7 million. Just bring his salary down, bring his cap number down, bring his salary down. You can give him some incentives, maybe, that he could earn some stuff back. I thought that's what they were going to do. So I was kind of caught off guard when it came that quickly. Now, maybe they did approach him and it was just a firm, no, I'm not taking a pay cut. And it was like, okay, then just,
You can pay me this.
Let's rip the Band-Aid off, and that's that. So I mean that's a possibility, but otherwise, yeah, I could see why teams around the league would think that was the case. That it was a surprise because kind of like you said, I think what happened with him is, you're coming from San Francisco, you're coming from teams that have good, better players generally around him, and I think he kind of fits that mold of a guy who's pretty good as long as he's got two competent players, probably, alongside him. Now maybe overpay for something like that, at the 13 a year that he was at. But I think that's probably what he fits in best with. Here, he didn't have that kind of play. He had sometimes passable center, left tackle play was always pretty bad. And I think you get the brunt of it because you would just see plays where the guys are just on two totally different sides. Who knows who's at fault? And somebody just comes right through and hits quarterback. So I think if the Jets planned on upgrading, at the left tackle this year, and you'd expect Tittman to be a little bit better at center, kind of thought like you could probably put him in there and he'd be okay, even if it's just to hold a seat warm for a rookie for a couple of weeks. But they just decided to rip the Band-Aid off. But I'd be surprised if he doesn't pick up with another team pretty early in free agency.
Yeah, I wonder if he goes back to San Francisco. Feliciano's a free agent. He's already making a ton of money that was guaranteed to him. So San Francisco probably brings him back on a 1 year, $3 million deal. And everyone's like, wow, he's so good again. Maybe that doesn't happen. Maybe he just is not the same player anymore. But, it just would be pretty classic. It happens to the Jets, and it's happened to the Giants a bunch. John Feliciano being a pretty classic name of like, Greg Van Roten, a free agent. I was doing the free agency rankings with, he had a really good year last year. Like, he was horrendous with the Jets. Like, he was one of their worst players, and he's been pretty decent with Vegas.
He was really good with them last year.
Made no sense.
Yeah.
Made no sense, especially with bad quarterback play. Sometimes you assume like it's like it would only be with good quarterback play, but he figured it out. A couple other in-house guys quickly, both special teams guys, really all three special teams guys actually. I would say Morstead and Zerline are like 90% going to be back. I mean, you can't put somebody at 100% unless it's, done in ink. I would say Justin Hardy's 50-50. Don't be surprised if he goes to the Giants. I'll just leave it at that. Special teams coordinator goes and becomes the Giants special teams coordinator. You can see that if they pay him a little bit more money. They should bring Justin Hardy back. When he's not in there, their punt coverage is frankly terrible. And when he's in there, they're really good. So I would keep him. What do you make of those three guys? Like, those are all like what, 1 year, couple million?
Yeah, they're all 1 year deals. You would if Hardy could get another 2-year contract. But I think the other two will be back. I think that they like playing with the Jets, and I think the Jets like them, and they shouldn't be too ridiculously expensive or anything like that. I could see in the case with Hardy, kind of what you're saying. When you do see the coaches move, the special teams guys almost always go with them.
Oh.
And with all the needs that the Jets have, and while the Jets obviously have a lot of flexibility to create cap room and everything else, they might not see the value in spending on the special teams when there are all these holes on the offensive line. You need more wide receivers. You need other guys that are going to make a bigger difference than someone that's going to help you, in your coverage units. So I could see a situation where he walks, because he gets a 2-year offer for $3 million a year or something, something like that. I think Maiden with the Lions just signed for a little over $3 million a year. So I could see that kind of being a target point, and I think that's just it might be a little high for the Jets, just with all the other needs they have.
Yeah, I wanted to hit on a couple other kind of guys that could potentially get extended, and I think in between, like DJ Reed's third contract corners, especially undersized guys, is never a good idea. That said, he's still younger. I can see the value in saying we don't want to have three guys like either under contract, going into contract years or needing to get paid at the same time. Let's take care of DJ now. We'll reduce his number for this year and even maybe next year, money down the line that he'll never see and all that stuff. I could see the value in that. I personally feel like I'd rather extend Michael Carter now before Taron Johnson, some of these other nickels get extended. You extend him on 3 for $22 million, 3 for 22 or 3 for 24, whatever it may be. He's locked in for 4 years. You don't worry about him. You have Sauce in a rookie deal. Like, him and Carter combined for 20, and you feel really good about just plugging and playing a therd corner going forward. He's one name. Carter's the other name that I think are the extension question mark guys. Tyler Conklin's the other guy. On a relatively pretty nice deal for the Jets, honestly. Like as bad as the Uzama deal was, the Conklin deal has worked out great. Like he's definitely not he's a better than top 20 tight end, and all things considered, and he should get only better with Rodgers. He's another guy where I feel like you extend him now because if he has an awesome year next year, like you probably price yourself out. And like then it's like, damn, we just lost now a tight end. We trust Rucker to be tight end one. What do you make of those three guys? Reed, Carter, and Conklin. I feel like they're three quote unquote maybe extension guys this offseason. Maybe you wait. Not sure there.
So I'd be surprised if they extended Reed. Now watch them go and do it like
Yeah, I was gonna say maybe